what are you doing, right? And so we think the problem is that only we can do it and they can't. But the actual problem, the real problem that produces the fantasy that only you can do it, is that you don't understand the essence of what you're doing. You don't understand the essence of how you do it. It's invisible to you. You know, Richard Branson, he's sort of the demigod of entrepreneurialism, right? He's incredibly successful. He's a billionaire, and he has a lifestyle that most of us would envy. He hangs out with Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, and lives on his private island, goes kite surfing, jumps out of airplanes, he's going to space, and he runs 318 companies. I don't know what the number is. It's more than 300. It's less than 350 and more than 300 companies. He runs 300 companies. Now, do you think he could possibly do that if he thought he was the only one who could do marketing and sales and fulfillment for each one of the companies? No, of course not. And I would argue that he's certainly as capable as the people in this room, maybe slightly more capable as an entrepreneur. So it's not that there's no one else that can do it. It's that we don't get what we're doing that works so well. We have all of our habits, all of the ways we do everything in one great big bubble. And we think that that thing is what's making it work. And if you change anything about how we do it, it won't work. Because we haven't done the investigation to determine what is it about the way we are in the world, the kinds of things we say, what is it about the marketing that we're doing that actually is really doing the attracting of the customers. We have to separate the wheat from the chaff here. What's the active ingredient in our sales process that causes people to buy? You know, I always do the same thing where I take them out to dinner and then I buy them a martini and then I make a joke about the government, and then I wink at them, and then but all that stuff that you do isn't actually what's making it the sale. And if you don't distinguish the things that are working from just your habits, then you think you have to have someone else do all the things the same way you do with all of your habits, conscious and unconscious, in order to be effective, when it's not true. You know, something like 3% of your behavior or 5% of your behavior is the actual active ingredient that's making the difference. And if you can distill what that is, then you can communicate it to someone else, and then they can reproduce that 3% or 5% faithfully, and then invent the other 95% with their own habits and innovate, perhaps even do things you can't do. So in order to start to get out of sustainability mode, you have to start to get curious about what is the value that you're actually providing in each of these categories. And once you're curious about what's the value that you're actually providing in the categories, then you can start to divide up your revenue dollar. You say, look, in my industry, this is like an average software company. So in my software company industry, about 20% of every revenue dollar you can allocate to finding new customers. About 20% of our revenue dollar we can allocate to converting those customers converting those leads, to paying customers. And this is 25, right? 25, 35 profit, 25 fulfillment. I don't have my eyes on, so. Yeah. So about 25% we can pay for fulfillment. And if it's a software company, fulfillment means my R&D and my engineers and all that. And then 35% gets to be profit and overhead. And I can spend as much of that 35% on helicopters and big towers with my name on it as I want. And the rest gets to be profit and distributed to the shareholders and to myself. You can tell my bias is spend as little on overhead as you can. So once I understand that what it takes, what the value is to make the whole machine run, and I understand that my revenue can actually be divided this way, that's a huge liberation point. It's literally like getting out of jail, because now I know what deals I can do and what deals I can't do. I know who I can hire and who I can't hire. And I can start to build a team to do these things for me, and I have my budget. I had an entrepreneur, last time I gave this presentation, come up to me and said, can you tell me if this is a good deal? This guy wants to partner with me, and he's going to just hand me customers pre-sold, and all I have to do is fulfill, and he wants 65% of the revenue, and I get the rest. Is that a good deal? And I said, well, I don't know. What are your numbers? What's the industry say for you? He was in a consultant business. Now, in a consultant business, the typical, and you don't have to be the typical, but you should be close to it. Typical ratio is that fulfillment takes about 50% for a consultant business. So he was going to have to do fulfillment for 45% instead of 50%. It seems like if someone's handing you customers and they're pre-sold and all you have to do is fulfill, it seems like any amount of money that you take for that's probably a good deal for you, right? Because it's free money, it's additional revenue. But as soon as you start to break the agreement you've made yourself about how these percentages are divvied up, then you're actually screwing yourself out of future growth. Because as soon as he does that deal where he's now getting 45% for fulfillment instead of 50, or 35% instead of 50, the other guy's getting 65%, he's getting 35%. He can't hire anyone to do that, to fulfill. Because his fulfillment budget is cut so dramatically. What I see over and over is entrepreneurs will start to get into business deals, partnerships, and hire subcontractors, but they haven't done this yet, so they'll give away 5% and 5% and 20% and 35%. Pretty soon at the end, they've given away 113% of the company, 113% of the revenue, and they end up working for free. My brother's been a general contractor for years, and I think it took him 4 years to make money on a house because, the plumber would get paid, and the electrician would get paid, the tile guy, and then he'd have to pay for the lead, and then the referral fee, and the thank you dinner, and then he was starving at the end of the day, and he did all the work, right? Getting clients. So it's because he didn't have these numbers. I think I said before, I just want to reiterate, in general, the percentages tend to be the same for different industries. And the reason is that because we live in a labor market, right? So an electrician, there's a kind of a rate that you'd expect to pay an electrician of a given quality. And so in that industry, that's kind of how much you have to get paid the electrician. That's how much you have to pay the electrician. So that's going to tell you what your fulfillment is, and if your business is to get do work that includes electricians, right? Does that make sense? If you have fulfillment that requires 2 or 3 people to do it together, you have to make sure that when you add all of them together, it doesn't equal more than your percentage. I've seen this problem several times where someone will do a service which includes a series of interviews, and then let's say photographs. Let's call it a photography business. So the photography business includes, you buy it, they interview you, they find out what do you want, they do some style consulting, they say you should wear this, you should wear this is our location, okay, we'll see you there. And then they shoot, and then afterwards they do the post-production where they dress up the photographs and send it to you. And they're like, okay, well my photography business is a service business, so 50% can go to fulfillment, and then they give 50% to the photographer. But all that other fulfillment now, there's no budget for it, even if you're the ones doing it. And so if you've given the money to the photographer and you're doing the extra fulfillment, you'll never get out of that job because you've not budgeted any money to pay anybody for it. It means that there are fewer profitable businesses than we think, because when the value equation isn't quite right, we often take the difference out of our own high. We take the difference out of our ability to work and our willingness to just hustle. But it's got to all add up so that you could replace yourself in every single category, and it would still be profitable. Once you have that, then you've got a real business and you can start to scale. So one of the objections that I got when, where we're headed is that you're going to replace yourself in each one of these categories. And one of the objections I normally get is, wait a minute, I don't want to work myself totally out of a job, and I'm going to be doing nothing. Right? I didn't get into this business to have passive income. I mean, some of you maybe did. That's a whole other story. But often people will actually like the work they do, which is why you got into business in the first place doing it. And you want to be involved in the customers. You want to touch it. But the role for you really is leadership, because it's through your leadership that you can start to see a picture of how the marketing can be done, how the sales can be done, how the fulfillment can be done, that will expand the range of those things, that will expand the reach. And once you expand the reach, now you're talking about being scalable, creating a scalable business. And a scalable business is where everything, the marketing, the sales, and the fulfillment, are delegated, automated, or outsourced. And you can see, once you know the percentages, you know your budget, then you can start training people. Oh, here's an automated marketing process. Well, here's a sales team I can hire. Here are some fulfillment guys that we can outsource to. We're talking about this at lunch. You want to delegate, automate, and outsource every aspect of the marketing, sales, and fulfillment. Now, what's curious to me is the one area that entrepreneurs rush to expand or scale is overhead. Most entrepreneurs scale their overhead first. The first person that an entrepreneur wants to hire is what? Who's the first? What's the first hire? Say again? That'd be awesome. What I've experienced more likely is that they hire an assistant. And then they get a bookkeeper. And then they might, I've had another entrepreneur who got an assistant for their assistant after they got a bookkeeper. And then, there's some legal advice. Then they'll hire someone in marketing, but they're not really a marketing person that can do it. They're really a person who's an assistant in the area of marketing, right? Like almost an assistant to your marketing person, because the person they've hired isn't responsible for generating any leads. The person that they've hired is responsible for making sure that the entrepreneur themselves has what they need to generate the leads. So I've seen companies with 4, 5, 6, 7 people being hired, but they're all in the category of overhead. That's the one area that they were scaling. And if you scale your overhead, of course, you're scaling your expenses. So don't hire people based on outsourcing the stuff that you don't feel like doing. Hire people based on outsourcing the most value that's predictably created for your business. Outsource the lead generation, the sales, the closing of those leads, and the fulfillment. So, until you start doing that, I was talking earlier about wealth and freedom. And wealth, as you see, is nowhere yet on this chart. Because the profit in sustainable mode, the profit section is usually just a little bit less than the lifestyle cost that the entrepreneur would like to have. And as long as you're spending all your money every year, you can't be wealthy. You spend all your money every year, even if you save 5% or 10%. In 20 years, you're basically in the same spot. All it takes, even if you save 10% a year, in 20 years you're in the same spot. All it takes is one bad investment. So once you're in scalable mode, if you scale your marketing and you scale your fulfillment and you scale your sales, then you can scale your profit, and that's where wealth comes into the picture. The first time that there's any opportunity for wealth is when all of the rest are scaled. And it makes sense, because imagine, once you have a system of getting leads that you know that investing more money will create more qualified leads. Let's say if you have 100 leads, you know that if you invest twice as much, you get 200. And 4 times as much, you get 400. And 10 times as much, you get 1,000. And you know that if you invest in a sales team, that they'll close those leads and become customers. And if you invest in your fulfillment team, that they'll keep those customers happy and deliver the value. Now you've actually got the money machine that we were trying to build in the first place, the first time. And all it requires for you is to come in, provide the company culture, the values, and the leadership, the vision that keep the rest of the picture glued together. Let's go back. Any questions about that so far? Can you see where you are in that picture and where you sort of got off the train and how to get back on it? If you imagine this as a target, in fact, you might draw, if you've got a pen, just draw these little circles, 1, 2, 3 circles, marketing, sales, fulfillment. And then fill in where you are. If you, for example, if you've gotten the value equation right, you might fill in the center circle. If your marketing is repeatable, replenishable, and predictable, then you fill in the first section of marketing. Same thing with sales. And then if your marketing is outsourced, you fill out the outer section, and you get a target. You end up getting a shape where at the center it's filled in, it's filled in depending on how far you've grown in the company. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Real quickly, sales, I'm not quite sure, what do you mean by sales?
Sure.
It's not the salary salespeople.
Could be. It would include that.
Okay. Can you expand on just sales a little bit more?
Absolutely. So there's a number of different ways that companies accomplish sales. One is they have salaried salespeople who make sales calls to customers and tell them to buy, and the customers say okay. Another is that they might have a website like a shopping cart or some kind of online thing where the customers are clicking buy on the web, right? And so the sale is occurring on the page. And then another one might be point of sale, like if you're a restaurant where the customer is buying in the restaurant when they're ordering. Really, the sales then sales and marketing or sales and fulfillment, can be combined. But I like to put the cooks in fulfillment and the waitresses in sales. In my way of thinking. Even though the waiters and waitresses do provide some of the fulfillment. And any tools that you give them, the uniforms, the software that the salespeople use, the training programs that you offer, everything that you invest in sales has to come out of that same budget. So you can't spend 100% of your budget on salaries over time. Now, when you first start out, it's probably going to be that way because it's just you and your buddy's selling. And so if it's 20%, your buddy gets 20%. You got to make sure you have a deal so when you have 10 buddies and you need a sales manager, that you have enough money in the budget to pay the manager. Make sense? Thank you for that question. Any other questions?
How are you getting when you say to figure out what your numbers would be,
Yeah.
Where are you going to pull those from?
That's a great question. So I just noticed that companies that were successful tended to all have the same ratios. So my best advice would be go to a company that's kind of in the same industry, because again, they're industry dependent, that is successful, and just ask them. And if they don't know the percentages, then ask them, okay, well, if you get, if you get 100 cars through your car wash in a day, what do you pay for the machines? And what do you pay for the guys up front? And what do you pay in marketing? And then do the percentages yourself. Does that make sense? The most reliable way is to interview people who've actually been successful. That's why one of the tools that we built, Jennifer and I, is a way for entrepreneurs to look at the skeletons of each other's businesses. So you can see someone who's already achieved the results that you want. You see the decisions they made, you just copy them. It's to make information like this available. But I just, just by coaching people and knowing, having conversations. Does that help? Do you think you can do that? Okay. Cool. So we're all going to be wealthy, scalable business owners, right? That's pretty cool, right? I wanted to clear up some confusion about overwhelm, procrastination, and about strengths and weaknesses. So once you have that model, and you know, all right, I'm scalable in sales, I'm in startup mode in marketing, and I'm sustainable in fulfillment. Then you know that where you need to focus on is the sustainability in marketing. In other words, whatever is closest to the center, that's the thing you need to focus on. If your fulfillment is not predictable, but your sales is predictable and your marketing is scalable, then go to the fulfillment and get it predictable. You just always start at the center, and that's what all of your extra focus should be on. Once that's nailed down, then you move to the next, and you move to the next. And that is the shortest path, the easiest path to grow your business to be scalable. Knowing that, however, you're still going to have some, I'll call them psychological blocks. And those psychological blocks aren't, they don't come from things that are wrong with you. They don't come from your bad childhood. They don't come from the economy in central Louisiana. They come from confusion that we have about a couple of topics. So I'm going to clear up this confusion so that we just go ahead and move towards the actions we need to take to be successful. Sound good? And the first is the confusion about strengths and weaknesses. There's a philosophy that you should focus on your weaknesses, right? And there's a natural tendency. If you get feedback that says, you're awesome at presentation, you're a great dresser, but your diction is like a C minus. The natural thing for you to do is to go focus all your attention on diction and try and get better, right? And then there was a book called Now Discover Your Strengths, which had a survey and some other things. You know about that? And Now You Discover Your Strengths had kind of a revolutionary idea, which is that if you focus instead on your strengths instead of your weaknesses, you're investing your attention and time in a high leverage way. So you're operating at a high level and investing there versus operating at a kindergarten level where you're not so good. Now Discover Your Strengths was a big hit. It's kind of a trick, though, for entrepreneurs, because the reason Now Discover Your Strengths works, the reason why focusing on your strengths instead of your weaknesses works in a business context is that most people are working in a large system with many moving parts. Everybody's got a role, that role is fairly defined, and at a large company it takes 2,000 people in order to produce the value that the company's producing. So if you only do your strengths, someone else can focus on the areas where you're weak and handle those things. But as an entrepreneur, you don't have that luxury. You cannot ignore the things that you're not good at. The company needs you to do everything. There's another, so a guy named Evan Pagan, who's an awesome marketing mentor and a close personal friend. He says that you should focus on your weaknesses in your personal relationships and your strengths in your professional relationships. It's like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. But I think we can take it one step further, which is you basically have 3 zones for every skill. There's the zone of failure, where it's just not working at all. And then if you get a little better, then there's the zone of operations, where it's operational, it's working. And then above that, there's the zone of innovation. We're actually adding something new to that skill or that field, doing something innovative and cool. And in general, as entrepreneurs, our strengths are above the innovation line, and our weaknesses are a little bit below the failure line. And so if we focus on our strengths, we still fail. But if we only focus on our weaknesses, then we never get into that innovation zone, and all we do is operate. Right? And you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, right? It's like, oh, I'm good at ideas, but not good at follow through. Or I'm good at keeping my word to customers, but I'm bad at setting boundaries and saying no. Or I'm good at putting on a happy face and always being there, like good morale for the employees, but I'm bad at reprimanding them when the time comes to take action if it's inappropriate. So you all know what they are for us. And what you want to do is identify what is that failure line in your business. What are the areas, what are your weaknesses that are below that failure point that are dragging the whole ship down? Because if you have some holes in the ship under the waterline, that ship's going to sink. It doesn't matter how innovative the coffee bar is, it's going to be at the bottom of the ocean. So identify what that failure line is and invest just enough in your weaknesses to get them above the failure line. And then stop investing. So invest in your diction just enough for people to understand what you're saying. But don't try to be like the speech capital winner of the country. Just invest a tiny bit until people get what you're talking about, and then you'll get an immense uptick in the value of your innovation, the value of your strengths. Once all the holes are plugged in the ship, then the strength can really sink. So the highest leverage point is just that tiny distance between your weakness and the failure point. And then let yourself off the hook. You don't have to be great at it. You don't even have to be good. You just have to not suck enough to not screw the whole thing up. And that's good enough. And as soon as you got that in every single area around your business, then you can really get the innovation going. So you've got to plug all the holes below the waterline. We have a business assessment that we ask entrepreneurs to take. It's a rapid growth assessment, and you spend about 15-20 minutes filling it out, and then it tells you how strong or how weak you are in each of the 8 key areas of business. There's infrastructure and web presence and sales and leadership, social media, and those kinds of things, right? All the things that you need to know about in order to be successful. And time again, what we found is the company on the left will grow more quickly than the company on the right, even though the company on the right has some super strengths that are much better than the company on the left. Does that make sense? Now, when you speak to this person that owns this company, what's this area? Ecosystem. So he's got like no investment in his business ecosystem and the other businesses around him that help him be successful. And tons of investment in structure and what's the other one? Yeah, leadership. So that means that every time he runs into a business ecosystem problem, every time that he runs into a problem that should be solved through a partnership, he tries to solve it through leadership. Does that make sense? And you do the same thing. You're good at something, so every time you meet a problem, you try and solve it the way that you're good at, instead of the way it needs to be solved. So to plug all the holes, you probably need someone else who understands your business to kind of look at where the water line is and tell you, look, you're below here, you're below here. Okay, second piece of confusion is about role models, right? So as role models, we usually have, these are popular ones. We've got Oprah and Branson and Steve Jobs. And we look at these role models and we try and copy what they do. It's a natural thing. And most of the time that I hear really bad ideas from entrepreneurs, the bad idea, right after the bad idea, they say, and that's what Oprah's doing, and that's what Branson does, and that's what Steve Jobs did. I'm gonna do it just like Apple, and blah, 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 and they give me a really bad idea. And it's a bad idea not because they aren't good role models, they're excellent role models. But it's a bad idea because in order to have their results, we have to have the assets that they have. We have to have the capabilities they have. And if we try and imitate their behavior without the capabilities, well, it's going to be a big mess. Oprah is famous for having creative control over her show. And I can't tell you how many people have told me that they want a television show and they want full creative control, just like Oprah. But that's a mess. It's a mess because Oprah had creative control because she had a huge audience. She actually, before her own show, was a local reporter, and then she'd gotten quite a lot of experience with what worked and didn't work in terms of growing her audience before she ever had a show at all. So she had all these assets. It's not the creative control that makes her special. It's everything she learned that gave her the right to have the creative control that makes her